In my dream, I see myself standing with a group of people all dressed in white. I see the Lord to the right. I see this gate, beautiful gate, shining with diamonds. And now the Lord does this. And the gates open, and the first man goes in. And she played beautiful music, came out of that organ, heavenly music. And then the gates closed, and the Lord did. Then the next person went. My turn came. I'm now on the front. I looked at the Lord. You can imagine what I felt. I'm feeling it now. Is it yes, or is it no?
This is a story of redemption, a powerful testimony that will shake the soul of any believer. It's about Pastor Benny Hinn's encounter with heaven and hell, a divine moment that changed the course of his life forever. Let me take you back to April 2016, when Pastor Benny Hinn, during his tour to South Africa, shared a testimony that laid bare the truth about life, faith, and the ultimate journey beyond the veil of this world. In 2015, Pastor Benny Hinn suffered a heart attack. He was rushed to the hospital, and as doctors prepared for heart surgery, Pastor Benny had a dream unlike any other. In this dream, he found himself standing in a long line. But this wasn't just any queue, it was the line to the very gates of heaven. The atmosphere was unlike anything he could describe, a mixture of awe and reverence, but also fear. Every person in line was draped in pure white garments, their faces filled with anticipation, yet some were etched with worry. Ahead of him, Pastor Benny could see the gate, glowing with a divine radiance that seemed to pull every eye toward it. It was no ordinary gate. It emanated the authority of the King of Kings himself. Standing there was Jesus, robed in dazzling light that could only be described as the embodiment of holiness. His presence was commanding and unyielding, yet it carried an undeniable sense of justice. Beside him, a woman played the piano, a piano unlike any other Pastor Benny had ever seen. Its music was not just sound, it was the language of eternity. Every note carried weight, resonating with either the joy of heaven or the sorrow of separation. This wasn't just music for the sake of music. No, it was music that decided fate. As each person approached the gate, Jesus would simply nod his head. One nod. That was all it took to determine eternity. If the nod was in approval, the pianist would play melodies that resonated with the glory of heaven, and the gates would swing open, ushering the person into eternal bliss. The air seemed to sing with joy as the chosen ones stepped through. But if the nod was one of disapproval, the music changed. The once heavenly harmonies turned chilling, sending shivers through the line. It was then that demons would appear, their forms dark and menacing, snatching the soul away to hell. Here's the most shocking part. Only 20% of those standing in line made it through the gates. The rest, 80%, were turned away. And these weren't just people who had rejected God outright. No, they were Christians, pastors too, people who had dedicated their lives to ministry. But, as Pastor Benny observed, there was one striking difference. The ones who entered had a genuine relationship with God. It wasn't about their titles or their deeds. It was about their hearts. As Pastor Benny stood there, trembling, waiting for his turn, his heart raced. He could feel every beat pounding with the weight of his life's work. He saw the pianist glance at him, her smile warm yet knowing. It was a smile that seemed to acknowledge his legacy, his ministry, the millions he had touched, the miracles that had flowed through his hands. Yet, when he looked at Jesus, it was different. Jesus wasn't smiling. His gaze pierced through Pastor Benny's soul, and in that moment, he knew. He wasn't going to make it. Despite his ministry, despite the millions he had reached, Pastor Benny could feel it in his spirit. He wasn't about to walk through those gates. His fear grew, each passing second stretching into eternity. The line moved forward, and with every step closer, the reality of his shortcomings bore down on him. He thought of all the sermons he had preached, the miracles he had performed, and the countless people who had come to know God through his ministry. But none of it seemed to matter now. Then, just as Jesus was about to make his decision, Pastor Benny woke up. The voice of God echoed in his spirit, cutting through the remnants of his dream. Don't blow it this time. This is your second chance. This wasn't just a dream. It was a divine warning, a message that cut deeper than any sermon or miracle he had ever witnessed. Pastor Benny had been given a second chance, not just for his ministry, but for his soul. Reflecting on this encounter, Pastor Benny shared a truth that many believers overlook. Throughout his ministry, he carried two responsibilities. One was to serve God's people through the gifts God had given him, preaching, healing, performing miracles. But the second, the more personal one, was his own walk with God. And that's where he had failed. He confessed that after his divorce in 2010, he had lost that connection with God. It wasn't just the loss of $7 million or his home, it was the loss of his relationship with the Lord that crushed him the most. What's even more striking is that during the time when he was furthest from God, his ministry saw the most miracles. It was a paradox that confounded him. The crowds would see the power of God moving through him, the healings, the deliverances, the wonders. Yet behind the scenes, Pastor Benny was a shell of the man he once was. He was going through the motions, relying on his gifts rather than nurturing his relationship with God. He revealed something that should cause every believer to pause. It's easy to become a pretender, he said. You get used to the motions, the prayers, the crowds, and before you know it, you care more about what people think than what God thinks. Pastor Benny's story is not just a testimony, it's a cautionary tale, a sobering reminder that echoes far beyond the life of one man. It's a warning to every believer, especially those who have walked the path of faith for many years or stood in places of leadership. It's a stark revelation that no title, no gift, no position, and no act of service, no matter how grand, can ever substitute for a genuine relationship with the Creator, the God who sees beyond appearances and actions, straight into the condition of our hearts, desires connection, not performance. This story forces us to confront a hard truth. It's dangerously easy to become so consumed by ministry, service, or the admiration of others that we lose sight of the one we're called to serve. It's a trap that doesn't announce itself, but creeps in silently, a shift from walking with God to simply working for Him. Pastor Benny's experience exposes the emptiness that comes from going through the motions while our hearts drift further and further away. This isn't just a story about Benny Hinn. It's a story about the God of the second chances, a God who doesn't discard us when we stumble, but calls us back when we lose our way. It's about a God who loves us too much to let us remain in our complacency, who warns us when we're drifting, and who, in His mercy, offers us opportunities to return to Him. For those who hear this story, it's more than an inspiration. It's a challenge to examine our own hearts. Are we walking closely with God? Or have we begun to prioritize the visible over the invisible? Are we seeking His approval, or have we settled for the praise of people? Pastor Benny's story reminds us that the greatest success isn't measured by what we achieve in this world, but by the relationship we cultivate with the one who holds eternity in His hands. This is not just about Benny Hinn. It's about all of us. It's about a God who doesn't give up on His children, no matter how far they wander. It's about the God of second chances and the question He places before each of us. Will you come back? Will you return to the heart of what truly matters? Will you take the chance He's giving you?